Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have A-Jax, or as was known outside of Japan, Typhoon. Another 80s Konami arcade classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Originally released to arcades by Konami in 1987, A-Jax, or Typhoon as it was known in Europe, would see several console ports afterwards, including to the X68000, the Commodore 64, and the Spectrum. So fast forward to 2021, and it's now available as an arcade archive release for the Nintendo Switch. It had previously released as an arcade archive title for the PlayStation 4, so this is a title that you've had access to on modern consoles for a decent amount of time. And although an interesting title with some different ideas going on here, this is not one that I've personally enjoyed my time with. The difficulty spike is just a little bit too high, and the mix in stage types just doesn't strike me as interesting enough and well implemented enough, which is actually kind of disappointing for a Konami shooter to really keep my attention. So ultimately, this isn't one that I really recommend, but it does have some interesting features nonetheless. So, diving into it from the main menu, putting coins in, we find ourselves here once again at the start screen. And you can start in one or two player. But one thing to note is it's two player alternating, not two player simultaneous. So we launch from a carrier as a jet, and suddenly we find ourselves as a helicopter. So thematically, the European version actually makes a little more sense than the Japanese version does. The Japanese version has a start with that jet scene, and then we're piloting the helicopter. So the game has two types of stages it switches between. So let's talk a little bit about the helicopter stages. In the helicopter stage, this is your standard vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, where we have a ground destroying bomb that we have to fire separately from our main shot. Throughout the course of the stages, it is possible to pick up some power-ups, and those power-ups are listed at the bottom of the screen. Now, it kind of looks like it would be your typical Konami power-up bar, where you select power-ups to move up the bar itself, but that's not really the case. What that bar is it shows us what weapons we have available to pick up. And aside from the bomb, where if you do pick up the bomb, that will persist with some of the other ones, we have four particular power-ups we can pick up. The Vulcan, which I do quite like, the three-way, which I deem utterly useless, the triple, which is probably my favorite of the various power-ups, and then the laser, which is powerful, but ultimately it's kind of slow. The bomb, that power-up just powers up our bomb that we're dropping on the enemies, making it easier to destroy ground targets. And there are certain stages, like this first stage, for example, where destroying ground targets is actually very important. So, although it might be easier to discuss this in the next stage. Oh, so this is a power-up. The O gives us options. I'm not actually sure how many options we can build up to, but having an option does give us additional firepower, so that really helps. Okay, so we've swapped over to the laser, so you can kind of see how that one works, and actually it's creating some interesting slowdown. So there are two types of power-up drops that we can get. So if we get the power-up drop from the series of small enemies that are flying across the stage, all something like 1942, then you'll get the option power-up. However, if it's from one of the red helicopters, then it will start off as the Vulcan, then switch to the bomb, three-way, triple, laser, and repeat in theory. So here's one problem I have with the game itself. So the power-ups are actually very, very difficult to get, as depending on where you destroy the helicopter, the power-ups will just kind of move off the screen, and the lower to the bottom of the screen you destroy the helicopter, the less time you'll have to get one of those power-up drops. Anyway, so I just don't like the way that the power-up system works. And also, when you die, you lose whatever power-up you have, which is frustrating. However, this stage, on the other hand, is really an awesome example of scrolling, especially given the time, 1987. Although, arguably, Sega's Afterburner franchise was significantly more impressive than this. But this stage is pretty neat. There are a total of 3 of these stages throughout the course of the game, 8 stages, then 5 of the helicopter stages. So if you were to play all the way through the game, you would see a decent amount of this. So our goal is we're flying down from the atmosphere, targeting this carrier. Once we get close to the carrier, we'll have the ability to drop our missiles on it, as well as continue to shoot it. Unfortunately, should you lose a life, you're basically set back to the beginning on this one. It's generally not too hard, but it does give us a decent chance to talk a little bit about the controls. So one thing I think is kind of interesting about this is you're controlling both the bombs and your shots separately. In the Arcade Archive release of this title, it's possible to use a button to fire both, but I don't think... Okay, so we've destroyed the carrier, boom, we're out of there. Really awesome, and then we move on to the next stage. So I don't think this game is ideal to have your bomb... Hey, we had an option, what the heck? Anyway, I don't think this game is ideal to have both your bomb and your main shot on the same button. And why is that? Well, there is a relatively long period of time from when you release the bomb and it actually hits the ground. In addition to that, we have a relatively limited number of bombs you can have on screen at any given time, specifically 3. So if you're not careful with how you aim your shot, it'll be very easy to miss the ground targets, and the ground targets are a big problem in this game, as they'll provide a lot of extra firepower, not too dissimilar from Twinbee that way, actually, in terms of just, well, forces that can, well, shots that will destroy you. And as you've noticed, it's actually really easy to lose lives in this game if you're not careful. It does get rather difficult, and there's actually one section coming up right here that'll show off the last ability I haven't talked about. So we do have one special power-up, a bomb, which is really useful for large enemies like this to take out very quickly. This enemy can be quite difficult as it launches. Oh sweet, so we've got the bomb power up, so I can kind of show the way that the bombs look when you have that powered up. They will deal significantly more damage and have a greater area of effect, so it's much faster to destroy ground enemies. One thing that is kind of neat about this stage is we do have these subs that will rise and dive, shooting missiles at us. Pretty fun to take out that way. So really, as thinking over things, the power-ups that you would want to get in this one, maybe bomb power-up first, and then whichever shot power-up you happen to like, be it the Vulcan, the triple, or the laser. Like I said, completely forget the 3-way. That one's just, flat out. Don't do it. So there we have it. A-Jax served up for your enjoyment. So as far as the minus flavors on this one, the biggest one for me is, you might have noticed, it employs a checkpoint system. And that checkpoint system brings me to my next minus flavor as well, is the difficulty is relatively too high for the kind of checkpoint system it has. It was definitely set up as an arcade quarter eater, and that's just the way that the game itself comes across. Not really that enjoyable. In addition to that, there's just the way that the power-up system works, where the power-up moves off screen far too quickly, and it doesn't give you a decent chance to pick the particular power-up you're wanting to use, since they'll cycle through at a set speed, and that's really going to be determined at how close you are to that enemy helicopter when you destroy it. If you want the Vulcan, if you're not right in that helicopter's face, forget it, you're not getting the Vulcan. On the plus flavor, I do kind of like that mixing of stages. So we have the 3D dive bombing section versus the vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, and it just provides for a interesting a change up in the gameplay, though it doesn't feel like there's enough of that implemented, and indeed those stages are so short they have more of a bonus stage feel to them. And something that kind of supports that idea is when you lose a life in the vertical scrolling section, you lose your power-ups. However, if you end the stage with a power-up, go to one of the dive bomb sections, lose life there, you don't lose your power-up. So it really almost feels like it was something that was tacked on extra. Hard to say. It was like they were trying to develop two different shoot 'em ups. Neither were complete, so they just glued them together, and bam, we have A-Jax. So ultimately, this is one that I have not enjoyed my little time with, and it's not really one that I can recommend. So if you're a big fan of Konami shooters and kind of want to experience everything they have to offer, then it might be worth picking this one up just for the sake of playing it or having a more complete Konami Arcade Archive collection, but that would be the extent of what I would recommend. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.